Pastor Tim, and we're doing a series here at Christ House called Ask the Pastor, where you can send your questions, and I'll try and give you some advice. You are welcome to submit questions in the comments or to email me, tim@christhouse.church. And these are just off the cuff, trying to make myself available. So I'm not saying that, if you want a full theological answer, there's libraries for that. But if you just want to get a chat, I'm happy to talk with you, and this is a way to start the conversation. So this week's question is, how do I know God's will? This is like the perpetual question, and this gets asked in big and small ways, right? Someone says, I'm coming to the end of high school, I need to make a decision for college. How do I know God's will for my life? And they want to know everything, apparently. Other days it's just, I'm weary with my job, I'm thinking of looking at a new one, or I've got more than one job offer. How do I know God's will? I've been dating a girl for a year and wondering if we should be getting more serious. How do I know God's will? I really appreciate it. It's been said by a couple other pastors I've watched. When you ask that question, we usually are asking it about a very specific thing. And while that specific thing might be a little tricky, the good news is you do already know the vast majority of God's will. You might not know which car to buy, but if you're wondering what to do with my life, well, it should share the gospel. It's always God's will that you share the gospel. It should bring glory to God through Jesus. That's always God's will. Anytime you can magnify, reveal Jesus, live like Jesus, it's God's will. Worship Him, it's God's will. Share your faith, it's God's will. Be surrendered to Him, it's God's will. You know that in general, God's desire is to be bringing restoration from the fall into the world, that He has come to defeat the works of the devil, is what it says in 1 John. So anytime you stand up for justice and righteousness, that's God's will. And the reason I hit on that is that wasn't what was going through your mind when you asked the question, right? We're just thinking, with the girlfriend, do we get along? Are we compatible? You're not asking, can we glorify God together well? Do we help each other share our faith more or better? But if you start with the specific and try to get an answer, you're just going to wander, and you might make some really bad choices. If you start with the general and move from general to specific, what you're going to find is it rules out a lot of things. If I start with the assumption that if I'm not seeing the general aspects of God's will accomplished here, then it's not a good scenario. Either the situation needs to change so that it can do those things, or this particular situation isn't God's will for me. It's not going to be God's will that I give up my witness, bring His name, into ill repute or slander, compromise my worship. It's not God's will. So you want to decide if you should move to take this job. That could be God's will, or it might not be. And I think you're going to have to make a discerned decision from the general. But if I'm moving somewhere where I'm going to not be able to have a witness, I'm a new believer and I need invested, I'm leaving a church that I'm super healthy and getting discipled to go somewhere where there's no healthy church, just because I get more money, I don't know that's a good move. You're going to have to weigh that through. And you weigh it from the general to specific. And here's what I would say, is if you can look at a situation and say, from the general, it fits, then I wouldn't be afraid to make the decision. Because if it fits what is the general revealed will of God, I think you can make a decision and trust the faithfulness of God to carry you, that you're in His will, and He'll make your way straight.